Welcome once again to the Spincast Cycling Show. I'm your host, Brian Kellison, Casey Shum, Lisa Vries, running late, Brian White. Music sounds great for the intro to our guest, special guest, Nathan Guerra, live and direct. Thanks, Nathan, for joining us. I know it's all professional now. We were talking all free off the air. We're just going to get right into it. I don't want to ride my bike right now. That's kind of what I'm feeling. Like, I don't want to ride my bike. I don't want to ride inside. Maybe outside I'd want to do. So I think we're going to get into like your origin story, like how you got into this. So how did you get into wanting to ride your bike inside a lot? A lot, because right now we have plenty of options. This is prime off season or indoor season. There's like 5 main things to do that are not Netflix or a movie or staring at the wall, and I don't really want to get on the bike. So how did you transition into that?
I should have prepped pictures, dude, because like we're talking 2007, 2008, 2009. Like, you live in SoCal though, Brian?
No,
right?
I'm Central California. So like
Northern
California.
Okay,
yeah.
Northern California. Still, you think it gets cold? Like, it
doesn't get cold. Yeah. I know it doesn't get cold like Wisconsin or Canada. So
like, I mean, there's something special about Wisconsin for some reason in Minnesota. It gets colder here than like almost anywhere else in the world. You go north and it gets less cold a lot of times. Like, so. You're a professional cyclist. You're trying to ride your bike. You're looking at Todd Wells and you're looking at Steven Ettinger and you're watching, kind of stalking what their training is. And they're doing 20 to 30 hours a week, and it's the middle of winter. And you're like, I'm gonna get my ass kicked, dude. Like, what am I gonna do here? And you've got 3 kids going on 5. Riding indoors is just like, it's the option. You don't really like. I got tendonitis so bad my first year of trying to go like next level from Citizen. I think 2002, 3, 4. I raced like a beginner level mountain bike, and started doing some research. How do I get fit? Do this stuff. I was late to the sport for my genetic talent. I probably could have gone a lot farther with how late I got in. I was a hockey player.
When did you get in?
In my early 20s. So okay. The dev wasn't there with the path for me either. So I had to like really forge my own way.
Well, how'd you get into cycling? How did you find the bike?
That's a whole nother. So when I was really little, I was on 2 pedals. My aunt says that kid's too small to be riding on two wheels. Like, what the heck? So my dad was a BMXer. My grandpa was a world-class triathlete and Olympic pentathlon. And so endurance sports and BMX were kind of just always around me. My dad got me on a BMX bike when I was like 2 or 3. I was somehow up on 2 wheels is what I was told. And so BMX, I always had the coolest BMX bike. My dad was always like getting the deal from the local shop for me to be on the newest thing. That was my connection to him because he wasn't like super involved in my life, actually. Okay. In some ways, like, it was like dad's on the weekends, my, split home. And so, but he had him and his brothers, when they were young, had built a BMX track in their yard, like in this little woods. And wherever you went, there was just always BMX bikes around with him. And so, yeah, that became my mode also of transport to escape. Like, when I was little, I remember also like trying to get to dad's. Like, I would just take off. I was such a rebel, dude. I got kicked out of so many schools, whatever. Like I was a lot of trouble, but the bike was an escape. I remember I rode a BMX bike from like one town to another, like 10 miles just to like get to another, it was a thing.
Just out all day
with the dudes.
If you were in school, after school.
And I always had like a drive to like push and be competitive. And so like, that was always there. Like, to give you an example, this new kid came to school in 4th grade, and he'd come from Arizona, and he was super competitive. I was super competitive. We all both, like, in gym class, were trying to outrun each other in the mile. And so like after school, we somehow started racing the bus home. like up Hill Street, like whatever, like, can we get home before the bus gets there? And there was a giant hill called Hill Street. And those who are from the area that have done Toad and some of these other like local, you know, pro Conti type races, they'll know what I'm talking about, what Hill Street is. It's just a up like for like a minute or something. Right. And we would run home and try and beat the bus all the way home so that's like my endurance. I always kind of had endurance, competitive sports, some sort of like martial almost, like, because also martial arts was a big part of my dad and my uncle's life too, and that actually like saved my life in some ways, to be honest. I was in a halfway house. I'm jumping all over the place, but
it's all right. This is good.
I was in a halfway house when I was about 15, 16, 17 and 15, 16, and like my uncle came and like started teaching me karate actually at that point. And this is kind of the origin story of my fitness life, I would say. Because he saw probably a kid with no direction, no discipline, you know, totally like lost essentially. And for some reason, the motivation to learn karate at that point, like, was enough for me to give up everything else. And he looked me right in the face. So like, I had no gi at that point. We're across the street in this park from the halfway house at like 6 a.m. And he looks at me and says, you got to quit smoking and like your grades got to be good and I'll teach you. And I was like, dude, all right. Am I going to do this?
Were you looking for something like this, or were you you were self-aware enough to go like, I need to do this?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I was like self-aware enough. I think at that point it was more of like, this is cool. And I want to learn to fight. And then it changed real quickly. Like all of a sudden, cause I thought that I was a badass, right? Like I thought, but
self-confidence was strong. Yes.
Right. Okay. But that was more social group and posturing and peacocking probably more than anything else. Right.
Yeah. Like a psychological defense because of the tough upbringing, the family dynamic that you have,
all
sort
that.
of like
and
survival
plus, like,
of that.
You're 15 surviving in high school, and what group's going to like accept you. And when you're in the position I was in, poor family, split home, like I think the easiest group to fit in with was the badass, druggy, you know, like rebellious types. And that's where I could fit and find some sort of identity that had a winning success in my head. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so then Rick comes along, my Uncle Rick, to give you a crazy background story, we're going so deep in, but this guy, I had no idea until he showed up in my life how deep into the roots of karate he was. The dude like was in direct line from the original Miyagi, like for real. Like there was the original Miyagi who was a real guy. And like he gave me the books. He said, you have to read the books of our tradition.
Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid story.
Yep. That dude who started Goju-Ryu.
For the people that are not old and don't have gray hair that are listening to the show.
Yeah. That
the
dude
first
started
Karate Kid, not the second, the reboot. But yeah, go ahead.
So, okay. Instills some awesome discipline in me. I mean, I remember I'm doing duck walks, like in no gi, just in my shorts. You know, I don't know if you guys know what duck walks are, but you like crouch down and you walk like a duck as low as you can to see how strong my legs were, whether or not I can even hold forms, you know, and stuff. Anyways, that was the kickoff of discipline. Did 6 months of that at least while in the halfway house. Totally woke something up in me. That's also where like my philosophy questions came in too, because I remember we're like leaving. And like God questions and like what things were. He got me meditating, you know, like, and he was like, what's the point of life? So it was really great, like twofold kind of like that would kick you off in a good direction. Cause not only was it instilling discipline, but it was also instilling like a why behind, like, why would you even discipline? Why would you even like big questions kind of stuff? And so, yeah, that was super turning point. I relapsed after I got out of the halfway house, but really like short because I actually found about 3 to 6 months later, I was on a waterbed like I had with like all this money and a lot of drugs and all this stuff that I thought I wanted. and I hated my life, and I wanted to be back in the halfway house. Life felt better in the halfway house. I was like, what the heck? Like, and I remember I prayed actually at that moment, and I started just doing the things I had done when I was in the halfway house, and asked for discipline again, started calling my uncle again, and like I joined the hockey team. Like, that was kind of a pride thing, because I remember some of the guys who were on varsity thought they were good at hockey. My dad taught me, got me playing hockey when I was really young too. And I was like, I can beat all you guys. So then I joined them just to show that I could like play varsity hockey or whatever. But did the things I was doing there, and from there it was like a rocket ship. Yeah. So anyways, that's young Nathan, getting into endurance sports and discipline and all that kind of stuff. And then I got married really young.
Let me go. I want to touch on the BMX thing for a while.
Okay,
when you
ahead,
were into the BMX thing and it was in your family, was there any competitive BMX that you were interested in, or you were just doing it to ride?
I got a couple trophies. I got I went to a couple events, and was very young though. I was very young.
Yeah, right.
And I think that could have gone a little further, perhaps, if I had been. It was hard to get to them, and it's like split home. So like, I don't fault anyone there. It's just
you enjoyed the
to
competition, but it wasn't that spark of like, it had to be BMX, the competition. That's how it was like.
No,
then you got into
the
you got into the karate
at that point for me.
Okay, yeah.
Like when I was that young, I played a lot of hockey.
Okay.
I got involved. My grandparents, my dad's side, they would drive me every morning, like to these events, and I was part of the Waukesha Youth Club. Played well, first line, played left wing. Really fast. I never get beat. Just so you know, you want to train with me? Red line, blue line, red. Dude, never. I was always first one back. Like in my entirety, I think there was one kid. I loved those drills, and even to this day, if I go play men's league, I'll close the ice out on doing lines just to make sure. And not the drug lines, guys. We're talking hockey lines here. We're not that. So.
Well, there's a lot of Canadians that listen to this show, so
good.
Very Canadian friendly. That's
good.
hockey.
Good.
Very well versed on hockey.
So cycling though.
Yeah. So you get it. So you did hockey and then cycling. Where's like the first like, oh wow, I like this. Either it's mountain biking or road cycling or whatever it was.
So Wisconsin has the Wisconsin Off-Road Series, and it was the largest mountain bike series in the nation. It was so big as a state series that it was being featured in Cycling News. We had the top 10 in USA Cycling rankings for a really long time. We were just getting their points mainly off of this state series. And so in my co-parent, Lindsay, we got married like really early, and she started doing these races with her dad and invited me, and I was like, spandex? I like BMX. Like, what the heck? I'm not doing this, you freaking weirdos. And then like they invited me, and she convinced me to go. And like I did one race, and my grandpa had a mountain bike. He had bought a Gary Fisher Hukuiku that was just sitting in the garage. And I was like, all right, I'll give this a try. And I did one, and I was like, this is BMX on steroids. Holy crap, I love this.
Did you have the spandex, or were you jean shorts?
Oh my gosh, dude, I got a picture of me like totally looking like that noob but you can tell they're a serious noob. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when they're doing the citizen race, and you're like, either that guy is gonna like get really into this, he's gonna burn out real quick, but one or the other is gonna happen.
So you start off with regular shorts, then you go to underwear under your biking shorts, and then you go to like bibs.
Yeah, that was pretty much how it went. I trained. I was like, I did one, then one Wars race, I think 2002, then like got totally hooked, got mountain bike racing fever, and started training over the winter. But like my training was on like, what the heck is that? The Aerodyne? Like, my gosh. Like I had no clue what I was doing, you guys, right?
You were just trying to get heart rate up. That's essentially, yeah.
It was so bad. It was like, and but I showed up, trained, and the genetics were there. I like won every citizen race. Back then it was called Citizen. It'd be a Cat 4-5 or whatever in MTB, and won the series, then stepped up to sport, won my first sport, which would be like your Cat 3. But then the jump from Cat 3 to like the Pro 1-2, right? And in awards it was comp, it was one below, but we went out after the elites. I jumped into the comp, which would kind of be your Cat 2, and like just got boom. I was like, okay, what are these guys doing? Because I was like riding my bike 5 to 8 hours a week, whatever, maybe. And that's when I was like getting lapped by like Brian Eppin and there's big names, Brian Motter, what's the guy, Jeff Hall. You know, there were some big names back then, Doug Swanson, that could all take podiums at the national level, but just race locally because there was so much motivation to just stay local. But yeah, and when I saw that, that's when I was like, what do I have to do? And you know what sucks is, in some ways, looking back, I never had the resources for like a really good coach, and I was pretty independent. Like I can figure this out on my own. So I got Joe Field Mountain Bike and Training Bible, and you can do so much with that, but without the experiential knowledge and the procedural knowledge, like those are a different kind of knowledge. Like I had kind of head knowledge, but I didn't know how to apply it after reading all that stuff. And there was probably like a lot of lost results for a few years where I was just grinding without any direction, you know, just doing hard efforts. Cause as a hockey player, well, you just go hard. Like it's like, you know, and probably missed out on some fitness, right?
You know, go as hard as you can for 30 seconds, take a rest.
So, okay, I won my first pro race in 2007, I want to say, for Mr. Tree Racing. That was my dad's company. He sponsored, he was a landscaper. He bought all our jerseys and paid some of our entry fees or whatever, right? And
you still have that jersey?
Oh, dude, I wish I could show you guys. I have the jersey, and we have like every year there was a photo guy who would put together like a team collage if you wanted it. And we have like me and Lindsay and Mark, her dad, and a guy, Jerry Lear, who raced with us, and all of my siblings, because I gave them our old bikes to make them race on our team. Yeah.
To build a team. Very cool.
So yeah, that was the start of the MTB stuff, and slowly but surely, you know, consistently top 10. Then I was like in the top 5 at the end. Then I was, you know, third. I think I was third in the World Series, like, I don't even know how many years. And then second, and then finally 2016, I think it was, I won that's right there actually. 2016 first overall in the Wisconsin Off-Road Series, and I was ranked number 1 in the nation for quite a while actually on the MTB from those points in the local series. And when the national guys would show up, it was tough because we would get like third row. So the hold shot would be really tough, but we would usually stack the podium except for like Ettinger and Wells, or like, you know what I mean? The world dudes, they could all like smoke us, but the national dudes, we would be on par battling it out for the lower podium spots 100%. I always brag about this on stream, but like, you know, I've won the Vuelta because Sepp Kuss is below me on the podium on one of those pictures. He was a kid at the time. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Another genetic monster.
Yeah.
So so then you're like, hey, I need to train, and then the winters you were training outside. What were you doing inside?
That's how I
stuff?
got tendonitis. So you know, Mountain Bikers Training Bible, go out and do single gear force work in the middle of winter though. Ooh, right?
Yeah.
The tendons didn't like that very much. So I got some really bad tendonitis 2005, my first step up to elite, and like had to like just take off for like half a season. And then just got sick of like losing limbs essentially, you know, like you get home and you're just like, this is stupid. Like, why am I in so much pain? And I was total gamer. I played a lot of WoW too, like World of Warcraft and a lot of Dota. And so I was like, can I put these two together and kill two birds with one stone? And we built a desk that essentially is like my desk here, but it was just planks of wood, and you could fit your handlebars underneath it. And I had a gaming laptop, put it on there, and then I would like make it so that the keyboard was in the same place that my handlebars could be. And I watched my power meter, and as long as I was in zone 2, I was good. and I'd play Dota and World of Warcraft for hours on end just to keep my mind like, yeah. And the story is like, I was kind of the night watchman. I've always been a night guy, like night owl. And so, Lindsay would pump breast milk, put it in the freezer or in the kitchen or whatever. I would have the baby monitor ready to go, and I'd be playing whatever, riding my bike. And then Kyle would wake up at that time, 2009, and I would go feed him, take a break from the raid. Like we'd be in like a World of Warcraft raid or something, and then I'd go take a break, feed him, come back, and finish out my 3 to 5 hour ride while I was going to school full time. I had class in the morning, probably like 10 or 11. I'd get there for classes, make sure they were a little later. And like, we just organized it so we could get it done. So that's where the indoor riding really took off, that I discovered that I could get something done that, wouldn't, impact the family in a horrible way, essentially. You know what I mean?
Because the time spent into it to stay fit like that.
Exactly.
Train that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's cool. We got into the weeds. I liked it. It was very cool. I didn't know that about you, and that's very cool for going into that. So then when the first initial, did you ever think like, hey, I wish there was like a virtual cycling game while you were playing Dota and World of Warcraft? You're like, hey, I wish there was a cycling thing. Did you ever seek out like a CompuTrainer thing or even that Nintendo game from way back?
But it was so bad that I just wasn't interested.
Okay, yeah.
I was just really entertained and like kept by the regular games, the video games. And so like I'd do a CompuTrainer session and I would be like, what? Like I would just, I'm sorry, CompuTrainer. Like I was into it in some ways that like, oh, I can go do this. I would get excited about it. Like, oh, I can go do this course. And then I would like do it and I'd be like, well, that didn't really do anything. That kept me
the theater
kind
of the
entertained.
Mind did not take over. Yeah,
no,
there's
not
a
at
big
all.
stretch because you were playing more advanced games. There's a lot more worlds to it. I mean, we talk about this with all the games that, I mean, we're on rails on, all the games that we have, the Zwifts, the MyWoosh, you're on rails. You can't really, unless you've played the Grand Theft Auto mod where you can actually just ride wherever you want to ride, which I've done, but you get stuck a lot. But when you did, so like when you were doing that and spending those hours, you were thinking, I wish there was something more. Then when, I don't know what the first one after CompuTrainer or the others, was it what's the one that you did, Casey?
Tour de Giro. Did you get into that, Nathan?
No, I did Be Cool, actually, I think it was. Okay. There was another one, I don't know, like Bicycle Doctor and Dousman, the dock ride, that's a old school, but they had something there that I tried. I can't remember what it was. I thought it was maybe Be Cool, but I was like, oh, this is cool. Let's go try that out, whatever, and again, it didn't. Here's another thing is like nothing, we might think that things aren't standardized now. Then, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh my God.
I started on Training Peaks RPE based with a speed sensor, right? Amp Plus power simulated. Oh, it was terrible. And then I went to Stages, which helped a lot. But then it went to Tour de Giro. I did that for about 6 months before Zwift rolled out. And I heard DC Raymaker talk about that too. He had done it. That's where I actually did my first races, was Tour de Giro.
Yeah,
that was with the Stages power.
You bring up the Stages power meter. I think that was a big. They're underrated in that sense. Though, where that was like a turning point, because I have Stages. I still have the same Stages. That was an entry level for at least getting, whether it was left sided, you'd get something. Because the other thing was SRM, which was way out of reach for a lot of people.
Or Power Tap, which is stuck in your hub.
Yeah. Power Tap was stuck on your hub, and so that allowed people to train inside, whether it was, like you were just doing it to a power meter or to a computer, your bike computer, and then you were playing games to just stay in that zone to get that training. Once we could start training with a power meter, and most people started using like either Stages or some other, like the Power Hub, right? That's
where, at that point, right?
Go ahead.
If you showed up at the local club ride back then, Nathan, like what, 1-2 of you had a power meter? Like nobody had a power meter.
Yeah.
No, nobody
like,
had that
if you
stuff.
have a power, actually, like when I first got my power tap, if you had a power meter, you were kind of a weirdo.
Right.
Like they were kind of like, oh yeah, like that. Like there's this so like old school cycling. You know how cycling is. It can be like whatever, dude. Rim brakes are where it's at.
Kind of like
right?
when you
Like,
started racing on Swift and everybody looked at you funny, right? Why are you racing in there? Get outside and race.
That's what the power tap was. Like, oh, your power. I don't. Yeah, they would get so. I'd be like, whatever, man. Like, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's that initial sort of like somebody who tries something new. It's always the stigma that you're the weird one. Now, like if anyone has like a jersey and bibs on and not a speed suit in a race outside, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you wasting watts?
I think that's me right now. I show up to the road race though with the jersey, bibs, and mountain bike pedals. You know,
there you go.
So all this was mountain bike stuff. Have you done any real road racing?
Oh
outside?
yeah, I was state champ here multiple times. But not like I only catted up to 3, and then I went to 1, 2, and like there was no money in it, and so I was like, and like I noticed on the road that the need to be involved in a team, that you had to be a part of their process and fulfill all of their requirements, and then the traveling would get bigger. And so the restraints on my life then for the things I valued were pushed me back toward the mountain bike. Like I got road race state champ 3. Okay, maybe I can win Cat 1-2 pro next year. And there was like this big jump to be involved in this team. And I got on LAPT, which was actually Eric Hill was directly involved with LAPT prior to Project Echelon being a thing. And I was involved there. I was like, it was kind of this mix, and I just always prioritized the Sunday races on the mountain bike, Sunday and Saturday races. There was just more money. I was winning like a lot, and so it was like, why am I going to go and play domestique over here or win sometimes maybe? And I just had control of my own destiny. On the road, the control of your own destiny is not as easy to get. It's very difficult to get actually. Where on the mountain bike, I could just be the strongest guy. Look, dude, hang on or don't. And so I would get so frustrated on the road because I'd want to just show that I was the strongest, and you just couldn't get away with that as easily. So it's,
Well, you're fortunate enough you couldn't live in a better spot to do the mountain biking, right? Like, I mean, you're right in the middle of the state. You can get to just about any race in 2 hours probably, or 3 maybe.
Yeah. That's the other thing is we could drive to everything. There was nothing we had to fly for. The only time I flew was for the national series when I was focused on those at all, you know. So, and actually the Wisconsin series here was such a high priority that I would fly to national and find a red eye and get back here to make sure that that's next day I could do the war series. So, yeah, it was a big one. That was a big one. Yeah, so then the introduction of Zwift was 2014. I got a message actually from, I think it's Austin Anderson, who rides for Empire now out of Salt Lake City. I think it was him. It might have been him. It was somebody, it was either him or someone who looks like him. Sent me a message and was like, hey, have you seen this? Because he saw what I was doing. Because I was posting pictures of me like riding in my basement with Dota up, or like I was making like videos of me on Facebook, like doing my 3 hours of training, and they were like, dude, have you seen this thing? And then I registered for the beta. Mike McCarthy was head of partnerships and sponsorships at that time. He was one of the first, 6 to 10 employees. I got my 3002 user number. And I was a pro at the time who was up and coming. He was like, hey, you want to partner with me? Look what I'm doing. Like doing that whole thing. And started immediately streaming. So I had already been building a streaming computer before I got involved with Zwift, because somebody was like, you're doing what? Somebody in my raid, it was our Hunter, actually, for those who play WoW. He was like, dude, do you know that like streaming's growing and like you're riding a bike and playing WoW at the same time? People would be like, this is crazy. What are you doing? So I like started looking into cameras and can my my laptop stream. My laptop can't really stream. Okay, I'll build a computer because that's the cheapest way to go. I'm on Newegg, finding because I knew how to build bikes, so I was like, well, I can just build a computer.
Yeah.
So built my first streaming rig. It was an AMD, and at the time, because AMD was cheaper, but dude, they were junk back then. Like, and just it was overheating right away. I was like, ugh. So then I had to like rebuild, took our tax return, and freaking built an actual. At the time, Intel was where it was at. Built an actual freaking NVIDIA Intel setup, and got live in January. I have it on my YouTube still, like me with like tips in the corner, support Vision Cycling, on Jarvis, riding with like Scotty Weiss, Casey Shum, I think is in some of those. Like, and we're doing our first like 100K and 100-mile Jersey rides on Jarvis, dude.
You'd get on there and be like, "Oh, there's 10 people on. I got somebody to ride with." Yes,
the good old days where you had to meet at the palm tree.
And Nathan was always on, right? Like he was riding those 4-hour rides playing games, and he probably wasn't even looking at Zwift, but you just grab his wheel and let him tow you around 10 laps of Jarvis Island because he was just setting in zone 2 going along.
Always on. That's true. Like in my head was I will always be live. Like that was my goal, was like I will do what I need to do to become a presence in this space, because I saw the grind that the regular streamers were doing, and I was reading about how they got big and what they did and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, if this is going to work, I just need to be a place that people can land. And so slowly, it was a small community, but I had this community. Like I would show up, and back then having 5 to 10 viewers of a Zwift stream was that was a lot of people.
Oh, that was
like,
huge
for a Zwift stream. Like what the heck? Like it was so. And
one
then,
other person to talk to, whether they're just chatting with you, is huge. Because a lot of people, like when they first start, they're like not talking, or they don't have the training. Like I was in radio, so I was always taught to. You're talking to everybody, even though you're not really talking to someone. But if someone shows up, then they can interact with you, and have that interaction is like meeting somebody on a group. You've been riding for hours on your own, and then all of a sudden somebody shows up, and you're like, oh hey, chat a little bit, hang out, do your thing. When you were like first streaming, you were doing it because it was a byproduct of your training. But were you thinking that this was something that could grow into something to become a sport? From just racing and riding on the Jarvis Island.
So it's not a coincidence that my best year so far though was 2016, because like 2015, 2016 things went boom on my fitness, and because of what you just said, I was super motivated to be on the bike because I had a community that was always ready to go. Right? So I would always do my intervals live. I would show up. And I was like, I don't want to do this. It's 10 p.m. Put a cup of coffee in you. The kids are in bed. You finally got the kids to bed. You've got 3x20s today, which I probably should have been doing more zone 2, honestly. But like, and I would get it done, and I'd be done at the end. And I would always say to my viewers, thank you so much. You guys got this done. I mean, seriously, I almost got like tears in my eyes thinking about it right now, because I would not get those things done if it wasn't for my community that was always showing up. And that's a shout out to Chris, you know who you are, Allison Duck, Casey Shum, like there's a whole crew of people who were my accountability community to get my training done. And my whole mission at that point was come along with the pro, like, and I'll try and go live at the races too. And then it was, let's be live all the time. And that's when SciOI, they were trying to become a competitor with GoPro at that time. SciOI was a sports camera that wanted to do live. And so they had their own servers that you would send to through an AT&T chip SIM card that they had like somehow got that SIM card to send stuff to their servers. And then they wanted to be a platform of their own where it was all this live action stuff, but it was too early. It's still almost too early, you know, for
it's
all
a gamble. It's like the ride or die, or what was the one? It's like the Ride channel, which was before YouTube. Like YouTube was still kind of not the place to be for everything, for like videos. And so action sports, because what was it, like skateboarding and surfing? They had the Ride channel. It was probably something like that, where it's like, hey, this might be a place where we can curate that sort of thing. And so you're getting an audience, but the growth of that is motivating you outside. When did it turn to motivate you inside?
So, okay, this is an interesting dynamic. Okay, so at the time I'm growing Vision Cycling, and Vision Cycling was a response to the lack of development and growth of cycling as a household traditional sport. And I needed that's my definition of a sport as a cultural entity, essentially. You are a kitchen table conversation that you could walk into any kitchen table in the entirety of a society and mention the sport in some sort of way, and a person at the table will at least have icons in their head or symbols in their head about people who are heroes or looked up to, or in some way they're something to aspire to. That's a good, okay? And so I was like, why is cycling not that for us? And as a religious studies major, philosophy major, I started a project off of my degree called Vision Cycling in order to instill cycling as a household traditional sport. So that I saw then that NICA was doing something similar with getting involved in the schools. And so I morphed it into a development program for elite juniors rather than just a totality. It's still a really cool program, and somebody could build it out where it was, what would happen is we would find the local entities that were most commercially interested, that were most grassroots, and that's your local bike shop. We'd start a team around local bike shops because local bike shops want to offload that responsibility. They want nothing to do with running a team. And so what I was doing was I was creating structures for those and applications through web-based applications to help grow those local bike shops team management as easy as we possibly could, while taking user fees and sponsorships to develop the juniors to give them something to chase after within the program, right? So it's a self-sufficient development program. And then you get the adults and the parents involved as those who are helping to instill the weekly sacrifice in some sort of way with group rides or ways that that's causing this value input, that you've sacrificed something toward this, so you feel an attachment to it. And so anyways, that was the Vision Cycling model. The funny thing is, this wasn't intentional. In my head, I didn't think that it was going to morph, but essentially that's what ended up being Vision Cycling Productions, then ZCL, if you think about it. Right. In some ways, right? Maybe not for juniors specifically, but it ended up being here's the weekly rhythm where you go and show the expression of sport. But I just made a big jump to the future, but the interim there is I'm watching, this is all going on in the background as my life job, pro racing, managing this team. I'm streaming every day. I'm racing, have a family, all that stuff. And I'm watching Dota International while during the stream at that time. At that time, I think that prize pool that year was 32 million or something for the Dota International esport competition in August. I think that was 2015, yeah. And I'm listening to, his name's Gods, and there's another guy, really good commentators. I was like, I can talk like that. I can do that. And so I was like, maybe I'll go live on my channel for a race. We have races. We have the Tuesday night Zwift. What was it called, Casey? ZTR?
Well,
Zwift training race, right?
We always got together for the KISS race, the Tuesday KISS race, which was European evening.
But it was ZTR one, right? To begin. It wasn't KISS at first.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't even KISS then.
Yeah, you're right, because Christian Weidman started it. It turned into XRS, but it was something before that. You're right. Yeah. Tuesday something, yeah.
So we lined up, but I didn't line up. I just turned the mic on, and I had a horrible mic at the time. I had, just me in the corner. I got that stream too. I could show you guys. And,
mic. Yeah.
Oh man, it was bad.
There's plenty of people still holding true to bad mics on streams throughout the Twitch area.
I start yelling about it, and it works. And John Mayfield was one of the first people to watch my stream on Twitch, actually. So I was on their radar, and he'd chat with me sometimes in there. And I shared it on Facebook. Eric Min reshared it. Was like, "What's this? Whoa!" And then they were doing a in real life thing with Canyon Schramm, as well as they were doing an in real life. They were doing the Zwift tour of North America, so they were showing up at local places. And I hadn't been on a live mic like that, and they gave me a shot where I showed up at a local event because Dave at the time was doing them, but he couldn't make some of them, so I went to one. Charlie Eisendorf and the crew at that time invited me in to that, gave me a shot, and I killed it. I got on the. I mean, there was a lot of nerves, but and they loved it. And we got pictures from that back then, and that kind of kicked off the more real partnership with Zwift. But then it was like Steve Beckett got hired on as head of marketing, and he was like, I think in his head, he was probably like, so the races are being broadcast on this dude's personal channel? You know what I mean? Like, I'm growing my Twitch channel. So then the ZCL deal kind of comes out of that about a year later after... late 2016, after a year of trying to grow because I was all motivated to like grow. All right, this is where it's going to be at. And I'm getting hundreds of viewers, but I'm pointing everybody at Twitch, right? I'm like, I need to get partnered with Twitch, and I'm thinking that content creator way, right? I'm thinking that whole motivation in there. And so about a year of that goes by, and then I think they're like, look, we need to solidify this into something, right? So then they were like,
this is Zwift approaching you.
It's kind of both end. It's kind of trying to figure it out. You know, it's a collaborative, like, how is this going to work? And a guy who works for Zwift now, Johnny Noblet, was a part of our Vision Cycling productions. He helped do a lot of the productions. We learned a lot of the production stuff over that year together. We learned so much in that year. And Johnny was building bridges at the time and was like, dude, this is taking so much of my time. Literally was an engineer.
Not building bridges.
Scotland.
Not building bridges with like people and connections. That's like a term.
He was working for a company that he was an engineer for, like building bridges or something. I don't know what his degree specifically is, but he was like, this is taking tons of time. And it was like, who's going inside kind of a thing, right? That's kind of where this ended up, where I was more independent. I've always been more independent. I've kind of got my own thing I'm doing. And so I stayed independent, and Johnny got a job at Zwift because they needed this like bridge to the outside then, where like that was my inside contact then that could do this full time rather than just like kind of sit on the outside. And then that's where ZCL came from.
So Zwift Community Live is a separate entity. Completely. Well, now it's an owned entity for the in real life thing that they're doing. That's a whole nother longer down the way conversation.
Okay. Yeah, the whole meetup thing.
So like, the branding. I think we talked. I don't know if we've talked about this on the stream and stuff like that. But I understand that like that was it's good for people to grab on to something that, I know what Zwift Community Live is, and it is a community live. It's a live event. It's the community. It's a good marketing piece. But I'm curious of like, you say you wanted to be independent. You wanted to do that. Did you ever wanted to be like brought in house with Zwift?
Well, that was a part of a conversation. That's been a conversation for a really long time, like a long time. If you listen to me right now, just listening to me right now, do you think that's a good idea?
No.
For the whole space, for the whole space, is it a good idea?
No.
Exactly.
And I'm asking because it's just a question that I think people would be asking. I personally don't think. I think you should be your own production company and do your own production stuff. And if Zwift wants to hire you,
I think maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah. I think if there was no other sort of thing, but like I've had these conversations with Damon from ZMS.
ZMS.
And it's more of like. Because he did a lot of RGT stuff, and it's like you can align with a company, but there's also like NBC, or the way that I see it, because I come from broadcast stuff, is like you can be a independent contractor and work with different sports and different companies.
So can I interject real quick, because the way you're going there is around broadcast, but let's back up a little bit even from there.
Okay.
Like if. From where I stand in this whole space, if I were to go inside at Zwift, what would that do with the ability outside of broadcast of me as an individual?
You would be like a Zwift evangelist essentially.
Yeah,
You would
and
be-
so and
that's
so
if you wanted to do that. But
right.
yeah,
And so if I stay independent, it allows me to do the Zwiftcast at that time in a way that is still critical. Do you see what I'm saying? That can still call things out.
Absolutely.
That can still be a reflection.
Yeah, that's
point.
why I'm glad that. Well,
Yeah.
from a
And actually,
outsider,
to give Zwift a ton of credit, dude. That was their idea, their foresight. Actually,
I think my only caveat with that is the Zwiftcast was still sponsored by Zwift, and I know that there's a lot of companies. There's a lot of, like, I watch influencers that do things, and they say, hey, this is sponsored, but they don't have final say, they don't have final cut. For me, that's sort of like the one caveat. I would be like, the Zwiftcast says this, but we are sponsored by Zwift. It's sort of same with Zwift Insider. That's my only caveat, and it's like it's kind of hard, not kind of hard, but it's like it's a little asterisk that I put on certain things. So that's my thing. But you're saying as an independent, you wouldn't want to be in the fold. There's a lot of people that want to be the social community manager for Zwift, and if they started out doing this sort of thing, that I totally get. But you were very independent. You guys were very critical and very independent on this. I don't even know if are you still on the Zwiftcast? Is that
Zwiftcast is in the middle of a restart,
but when you
so,
the first one, and then the wrap, I think the wrapped is no more. But you were always critical of the things that you felt you needed to be critical about.
Yeah, and
But
I
you
couldn't
also-
have played that role if I were working at Zwift. I would have to work on other things, right? So
it could be, hey, we're the Zwiftcast, or whatever it would be, the Zwift informative podcast, and it's a Zwift sponsored thing, totally Zwift, and you can totally do that. I'm all for that. But when whatever entities or news outlets or entertainment outlets are sort of sponsored by something or funded by something, it could be perceived as, hey, this is a little bit, it's sponsored, so it's got its own sort of legs to it, and so you have to be a little bit questioning on that. That's the only thing.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I'm with you on Nathan. Like, yours, like, I don't want to be in the machine.
That's something I gotta also say, my desire either for security, or I remember having a conversation with somebody I really adore from Zwift that used to work there, and she was like, Nathan, just because you work here doesn't mean you necessarily have more security, but you're a part of the family in some ways, you know what I mean? You've been here a really, really long time. But at the same time, nobody, regardless if we work here or don't work here, right?
Yeah.
Like anything could happen here. So a contract's a contract. One type's employment.
Oh, totally.
And one type's just outside employment. And they have different responsibilities and roles in different ways that they can interact with the company and with the public, you know? And so that conversation, as well as a lot of the leadership teams, disposition towards bringing me in or not bringing me in, I think had more foresight than I did in my position at that time, because I was just probably hungry for security as well as get things done. But just because you go inside and you think you're going to get things done, do you actually have the ability to do that? How many people have tried to do those kinds of things at all different kinds of companies across the corporate world? And
absolutely,
do they actually get done? You know?
Well, I'm sure. I mean, at that point in your life, just hearing what you've said here, Nathan, that battle, right? That internal battle, because clearly family's a priority for you, and having that security for your family and the passion for the sport and all that, it takes a lot to be no, this is better if I don't jump on that ship, that in that way, even though it does provide some things that are very important to you as a family guy.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you look at this, and this is blessings in disguise, how many times have there been, rifts like downsizing since 2019 up until now? 2019, huge investment towards esports business and Zwift. They had a whole thing that happened there. Then there was COVID, big boom, and then a bunch of hiring on, and then now, and everyone, this isn't just Zwift, this is across the board, just upsizing, downsizing, figuring out what does this market mean, so if I didn't do that, would I even have a job right now?
Yeah,
is the question, right?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah, but you could still do the broadcasting. There you go. That's why there's a benefit for being independent. There's benefit for, hey, I want to further my career, or I want to do this thing, and everyone balances it their own way. So
this may be jumping way ahead, but I'm just going to ask a question. The hypothetical Nathan, it's the same money in your pocket whether you race the Elite Series or you call the race series. Which do you choose to do? Race it or call it? Same profit to Nathan as an individual.
Well, okay, but then there's another question that immediately pops in my head is like, there's also, can I also bring in what the trajectory of my life meaning is longer term and my life work meaning is, right? Because if I'm an elite racer and only an elite racer, the meaning and the understanding of which I hold in my procedural and experiential knowledge is not the same as because my perspective on sport and cycling is so different now than it was when I was just a pro racer. Like, and this is no offense to the pro racers. Like, all we think about as pro racers is results and chasing that carrot. Like, and we have a little bit of like what the service of sport is on mind. And we get it in some ways, like, and you can bring that to the table actually from the racer's perspective to like balance out administrative work actually later on. And when you come in new and fresh, but like, you know, and you see that transition a lot. In a lot of pro careers, you see people transition from pro racing to administrative work of the sport all the time. And it's great to have that fresh look coming in all the time, but it needs to be balanced all the time. And I really, really, really like where I am now because of the experiential and procedural knowledge that I have being so connected in the administrative side of the sport. And I would definitely never, ever, ever want to give that up. In order to race my bike more. And I've raced my bike plenty still. And I've gotten the best of both worlds over the last few years. I mean, I'm still have a pro card at 43 years old. And I'm so like incredibly thankful to be able to do both those things. So, at times do I look at the numbers that some of these boys are doing right now and I'm like, dude, could I do that? And then like, well, I'm still, and the age stuff just doesn't work out for that though either with how the sport is growing.
We need masters racing,
so
we need more masters racing.
Yeah. We can't keep up with those kids anymore, but that's what allows you though to provide a unique perspective. I mean, that's why I enjoy listening to you call races and always have is the platforms and the racecraft both, that you pick up on things commentating a race that I think a lot of people miss. That thing, and I'll even see it. I'll see it in your eyes when you're calling a race sometime, where it's like I need the camera to show something that I see happening on the screen because I see it happening too, but the shot's maybe not going there or something like that. Like you're able to see something. Was it like the old NASCAR racers, right? They could see the air, right? Like you see something in a race on that riders nearby list and that's intuitive to you because you have the muscle memory, because you've had to do it at 180 beats per minute in a race that a standard commentator, I think, misses sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like that's the thing is it's a really good point, Casey, because without the experience of esports and the courses and all that kind of stuff, that's a good word you used there about because it is something that's in the air, right? It's a sixth sense, the predictive nature of all of the experience and all the senses coming together that knows a future state all the time. A really good commentator has to have that. You have to have a knowledge of what possible future states are coming in order to talk about what's even being experienced now by the riders and because you're telling a story. You're telling about where we've been, where are we now, and where are we going, right? And it's all about narrative, the whole thing, because otherwise sports just doesn't mean anything without narrative.
Agreed.
Like it literally means nothing. And so in order to tell that story, it just can't be superlatives and adjectives over and over again. Like I can do that all day about us. Brian, you look really great and you're really amazing and your glasses are awesome. The glasses are awesome. And that mustache Brian, it's got a little bit of gray and a little bit, man, just enough salt, Brian.
Just enough.
This is great. All right. And we could just keep saying great and great. And it's like, that's not a story.
No.
So.
Well, I wanted to, because you came on my stream a couple weeks ago and I was just talking, I was asking you about something and you do a great job and I really enjoy your commentary, you and Dave. because you do explain things that the game doesn't really show. And I wish the game would show more. That's where I'm like, if we could have more more avatar sort of like, I don't need it to like be over the top, but like the way that I read my races, like when I race or I'll do something and like, oh, here's where the attack happened or a counter attack. And I even learned something from you way long time ago of like the draft, the old pack dynamics. What it was is like, don't ever go to the front because you're going to be the first one. So stay in the front of the little bubble, right? Those are things that are explained, but it's hard to kind of see when it's just the avatars that don't move. There's a lot more flow in real life. So how do you over time find new ways to see the race or see it? Or are you asking Zwift like, hey, we can do this, or we can have more animations that could kind of do some stuff to liven up the sport?
Yeah, so I wrote up some documentation about this, a while back. And there's been many cycles of figuring this specific topic out. But the needs of the platforms are a little more basic in some ways to that, right? Like, you are still in some ways in simulation mode when it comes to who you listen to in your market. Like, who are you going to serve and where's the biggest value request, right? So when I say that, I'm saying, where's the most amount of money coming in from a population that's requesting something of you, okay? And simulation of things that makes sense to as many butts as we can get on bikes is probably going to be a high, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this. And just so you know, now there's a part of me that's like, oh, it hurts to know that I don't know that even ever within the Zwift world or any of the worlds, we're going to get to a place in the next 5 years where having the ability, and this is the answer to your question right here. I need a one-liner for it, but it's, if you can watch the game and know exactly what the person is feeling that's expressing those watts at that moment, then you've done it right. And so however that might look on the avatar, subtly, it doesn't need to be Overwatch, sparks flying everywhere like the spit out of my mouth right now. But like, I think that is when you've really hit it on the head, is that the commentator then is speaking to what is obvious in game of the expression of the effort, as well as the expression of the narrative between the avatars. So this is nuanced development though, right? Yeah. Extremely cycling specific, nuanced sport narrative development into the graphical nature of the avatar's interactions with the world, with itself, how it looks, as well as the pack and the other avatars. That's a lot of dev work. And now we're talking about AAA game level, right? Now we're talking Apex. Now we're talking World of Warcraft. And I just don't know that there's the dev teams available in this space at this moment for that kind of dev work. Cause that's pretty down the rabbit hole. Whereas now we've got all these people who just want, I want average power and laps. Now I've got average power, but where's my laps? You know what I mean? So we're kind of, that's a pretty big jump there, right, Brian?
We're totally on the same page. We're totally on the same page. I'm just thinking that like, could we have, like the way, cause the way you said, the way that you can express with the watts, I'm thinking, what popped in my mind was when you run in Grand Theft Auto and you run out of stamina and you kind of like slunch over and you're tired. We don't have any negative animations. We have drink the water bottle, get out of the saddle. Nobody's like really stressing. And I'm not saying that like if somebody's smashing on a climb, they might not be hurting, but we all kind of know they might be hurting. Can I jump on that real quick?
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah. So that's where the energy bar came in on ZCL, is like, I wanted to develop a metric, but the metric I don't like ICU's metric for this specifically. I think we should have used exerts. But we couldn't get a hold of that to be expressed in an algorithm in the backend data. If you go in Sauce has the what's
Watt
the
balance?
word? What's the watt balance? It has watt balance in there, right? So we took that watt balance and we at ZCL with an awesome dev that I have that works with me. Shout out to AJ. He helped me to create an expression around the watt balance bar to go down as an energy level, but that doesn't actually tell you what you're looking for there actually. And I was like, what we actually need is Exert's algorithm. I'm not saying ICU is bad for its application, but it's not good for actually telling you available energy, because that's what Exert is.
Yeah,
it's
you're
literally
talking about
available
emptying
energy.
the tank. Yeah, because has that sort of
and
like...
then it would express in that bar. Once we have that bar, then we could put that into a graphical expression around the avatar that would have different states around the Exert available energy. And I tried working on that and pushing that for a solid year or two. But again, where's the resources, right? Who's, you know, what are we going to do?
Who's the audience?
Who's going to dev that?
I
right.
gotcha.
So, and this reminds me of the same topic, flipping to live action stuff of the UCI World events and a lot of the feedback they got on the streams, because they weren't showing enough of that physical expression of the riders alongside the game, right? Like there wasn't enough balance of both sides of it. Is you were either just watching the avatar or watching some random shot. Like there was no connection between that, and the broadcasts need more of that, right? But the game needs more of that in the actual animations too.
Yeah, and then it's like broadcast versus game. In my opinion, you know, the best space is broadcast is always supplemental and game is always main. And we've got that backwards a lot of times right now, only because of how much resource and development is there. You know, is it a resource issue? Is it a project management issue? Is it you know what I mean? There's a lot of questions that come up there then.
Totally. There's like, the balance for me is like the story, like we're all on the same page here with the story is what we want to be telling. And some people's webcams are not the greatest production value. Sometimes they're not this, but we had the blob so often that like, it's really hard to pick out people. Like we had the numbers maybe, and then they had name tags on top. But when you could cut to somebody, like when you ISO somebody and then you cut to their camera, that gives a little bit of nuance to it. It's like, oh wow, they're out of the saddle or doing whatever they're doing. It's just when we have the game itself is where it's like, how do you get that separation?
My take on that is, and it like in the last 3 years, I kind of came up with this tagline in conversations that were on this side of the camera's a supplement. When we don't need it, we know we've done the game right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
yeah.
And I think that it should be there. I'm not saying take away the cameras. Don't hear that.
No,
it's not. But but like the camera of the person in their inside space is literally just a supplement. And if we do it right, we wouldn't need it at all, and it would be seen as just sugar on the cake.
Yeah.
So
we want better rider animations. That's what we want.
All right. I'm gonna ask Nathan some easy questions here. Okay.
Oh boy.
Softballs.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
Swift race score or watt per kilogram? What's the best categories?
You know, so this is where I've ended up. This is only proved that we need competitive and casual. That's all it's done. All it's done is that we need to get the heck out of this entire framework. We need a completely different orientation in two different spaces.
Yeah.
This is a competitive space in which we are ranking and we are governed and we are doing all that in order to put people place. And this is a casual space. And guess what? You can rock up on your watt per kilogram because we'll just throw you in a pen and nobody cares except for that they want their workout. And it's great. And I think, and then people can have all these fights about how the ranking system is working over here. But I think that maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe you'll just end up like this place will just suck. I don't know. But I think that I think at least separating those two things would make things clearer. I don't know, because right now the water is really muddied.
It's really muddied because the communication of it, because the people don't know what they need to know. Like there's a point where like, hey, if I'm going to weigh myself before a race and I'm going to get on a race and I paid money or whatever, entry fee, that I know is a competitive race. So I'm going to be like, okay, this is my race. I'm going to get mentally up for it. Hey, I did a workout. Now I'm going to do a recovery race. That is not where you should be scrutinizing the competition. You should be just like enjoying it and going, okay, whatever. And that's the communication of like everything is a race score now. We had the separation of like the test phase of the race score, and people were still in the category, and now people are using that sort of old mentality to try to apply it to race score instead of just. I kind of want just race score to go away. I want the numbers and the letters, and I want all that. Just show up and do what you want to do.
I think race scores. The race score is okay. It's just there's
because
too
you
many
understand
people.
it. You understand
Well, no,
it. That,
there-
you're like
there's-
you have the math algorithm behind. You're like, I know exactly what's going on.
There's-
Like
there's
I have
too many
no idea what's
people-
going on still.
There's too many people that have the old history of Zwift where it's like, if you click race, you better show up to race. Quit clicking race thinking you're coming
That's too much
into a
pressure,
2.5 watt per kilogram blob to sprint at the end. If you want that, go join a group ride and win the sprint at the end, right?
No,
Same thing as racing to the city limits sign on the Thursday night group ride,
There's
right?
a casual space though, Casey.
Yes,
there is
totally
there is casual
Yeah.
But
racing,
people
but there's
people want to not take it seriously, and if they do well, then they take it seriously.
like,
That's humans.
I'm getting my butt kicked by guys, 4, 5, 6 tenths of a watt per kilogram stronger than me the entire race. But you know what? I'm still finishing 4th or 5th in the sprint at the end. So I can argue that I shouldn't be racing these guys, but they got to get better because they still can't beat me. So it's like the score's working, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think now here's the other side of like, I do think the communication of racing score, like we need cat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like that would be really nice to like, it's just cats, you know what I mean? It's
Masters.
not these numbers, you know what I mean? We don't need these numbers necessarily that are
Yeah.
like big ranges to the way that we communicate that. I think that would help just the communication that you're a cat 1. You're a cat 2.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a cat 3. You know, like
the constant changing of the number is really messing people up.
yeah.
That's the thing. And it was no sort of like, this is where you were and this is where you are now. And so people are like, I don't know where I was. And like, oh, I dropped this many points. And then they do. And it's like, I wish they would just hide it again. Like I was like all on board, but now it just stirred the pot so much that all the, like you said, the muddy waters, man, it was the clear water at the top and the mud was at the bottom. And they just stirred it up. And now people are so losing their mind. I find it fascinating and funny because my colleagues here have really dug deep in trying to inform people that this is going to be good. I don't think it's ever going to be good because the mentality is not the casual, serious rider on Zwift. Plus, with all the content that's being created, not every single one, but the majority of videos that are coming out with their races are, this is the worst thing. It sucks. Everyone's a cheater. Not everyone's a cheater. You're just not as good as you think you are, and you don't have to make the podium. My last racing score race, whatever I did, I raced up because I was going to race with a friend of ours, Mark Fezwheel, right? And I was like, I'll race with him. He didn't show up, whatever. Whatever. He races a bunch. I raced, and I won I went up to a higher category and won because I just was doing smarter things and counterattacking and maybe pushing the. There's racecraft that needs to occur, I think, in Zwift and most racing that we don't have. We have workouts and group rides, and then this sort of free reign of hey, recovery race, recovery rides. There's a lot of events that happen. They're not all serious, and people take them too seriously.
What is good racing? Is it winning all the time, or is it pushing yourself to the limit and sometimes breaking? I think because to me, this is better, right? I don't even know if I want to get into measurements of whether it's good, great, whatever. It's better than what it was, right? It's a step in the right direction.
Well, that's the thing is like, what are you looking for, Casey? And what are other people looking for? I think in the watt per kilogram space, people are looking for something consistent.
Yeah.
Right. And in the competitive space, you're looking for, how am I progressing? Am I not progressing? Am I holding on to something? And coming from a racing competitive, I want to prove in where I stand in this community amongst racers, and like that makes sense to have the racing score ranking system, and I think, because here's the thing, it's kind of like trying to do two things, and I don't know if those two things can be at the same target. One is trying to categorize you for a good experience. I don't know, like, racing your bike. Like, what do you mean by good experience? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing.
But what is Race
after.
Score's goal? Did we ever define what the goal of
and
Race Score?
So from my understanding of what I see Zwift doing is that their goal was to is mainly to categorize people. I think that it's mainly to go after ELO. It's mainly to go after where is your best race going to be for a fair, even playing field. And I don't know that ranking is necessarily a ranking ladder is necessarily about that. Like I at the heart motivation of why I show up for a ranking, I want to know where I stand.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know, like, am I better? And that's what a finish line's about. And then when you get into a racing score place, it's the set of finish lines among finish lines, right? You have a set of finish lines, and who's winning the most of those finish lines is what this set of rankings is. And so that's a very different motivation than let's find where you fit the best.
Right.
You know what I mean? Those are totally different things.
I remember the early conversations, because when Zwift Racing app, is that what it's called? Zwift Racing app? Whatever the community ranking.
Yeah.
I thought that was the goal, was to try to solve the matchmaking, or I think maybe you brought this up, where Apex Legends or something, where matchmaking was good to help fighting, sandbagging, all this stuff. It's like you join a race and the thing will find you the people you need to be racing against. And I think that's what the goal was. I don't know if it's being successful in that sense, but the categorization, like you're saying, is yes, because there's no more letter, because a lot of people were like, oh, I'm a C racer or I'm a B racer. And it became that. That was the sort of mantra that people had in Zwift. And now they're trying to apply it to this racing score that changes all the time. I believe it's to try to help the majority of racers that want to race against the people that they feel physically aligned with. And we're getting in this sort of, well, that's not where I'm successful. And maybe the...
So can I... Okay,
yeah,
so
go ahead.
So here's what I think are real... There's a couple of problems if we step back a little bit that people might like... You have a lot of people who liked it the way it was because they were getting whatever rewards that they were looking for. And I'm not going to be pessimistic about those rewards. I'm not saying right, wrong, motivation, whatever that might be. And then we have another group of people who are like, I'm liking where it's at right now because I'm getting whatever rewards. And then we have people who are on either side of that. But here's the thing is, I think there was a lot of people complaining before with the watt per kilogram thing, and that people were sandbagging and I can't get it, and then the same thing just kind of flipped on the other side. Yeah. And I think the reality of like, I'm coming to this space with the expectation that there's enough people to fill more than 5 categories, because that's all we got. We have the old system of A, B, C, D, and E pens. We only have 5 pens, right? We'd have to make more pens. We can't just make more pens, it seems like. And do we have enough people to fill all those pens? So like if you go to an in real life mountain bike race, if women's cycling's not huge, there's 3 or 4 elites that show up. You have the same it might be a problem of population and number of pens. Like, and I see the complaints as well in chat right now as well. And I have the same issue is like I show up to an elite race and I can only do an elite race at very specific times right now. Elite or whatever you call 900 score right now, I think is what it is or whatever. It's like, I only get very specific times that I can race. And sometimes if I go to that race, I either have like people who I just whoop on, or Panizza shows up and smokes us all. You know what I mean? Or whoever, like, or Tugels or whoever. And there's a big jump in there. And so, this also in some ways is about growth. Like, can we grow the pie enough to have enough bifurcation, enough like split? Because essentially, if ZRS is able to work, because I think it can work well for this, if there's 7 to 10 pens with enough population filling those pens. But that's with the assumption from the community that we have that. So the providers are just in a really tough spot where the community is expecting something that's like, what, do you want us to put bots in? Because that's what the other platforms do. And I've raced them. They're fun, actually. It's kind of fun in the points races.
Bots are good. We like the bots. This show likes the bots.
We figured out the recipe the other day, and Zwift can just sit back and if they can solve
the recipe. All right.
If you can solve this recipe, you've got it made. Every person needs to win every race that they join, and they only want to race humans because they want to feel like they're beating other people and not bots. So if you can figure out how to get everyone to win every race that they join while beating other real people, you've solved it all. You can come back. But you're right, Nathan, on the people thing, because that's the other side that I'm at. Like I'm a good enough racer that I'm bouncing between pin 1 and pin 2. About once every 3 weeks, I get enough score to jump up and get my butt kicked by KBH and some of those guys, right? I did tiny races with those guys this weekend, and it destroyed me, and I went away happy, right? Because they only dropped me in 2 of the 4 races, right? And that was satisfaction for me. Same thing, like I'm not competitive against you, Nathan, but I've earned the right to be there, and I'm proud of the fact that I earned the right to be there, and I get my butt kicked and I come back down, and that's, to me, is the biggest win of ZRS, is the fluidity of it. Is in the old world, you had so many people that were forever stuck in the drudges of low C or low B or low A category, right? The poor guy that was doing 4.2 all day long, and he's always lined up against the elite A+ riders, right? Like those people were
like 2 years.
forever. I was scared to upgrade.
We could have a matchmaking system that one solution that we could just do is at this number, we mix the pen.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's about to start. We're 5 minutes out. Just so you guys know, pen 1 and pen 2 are going to mix because we only have so many starters.
Yeah, race together
does, right?
Separately, right?
Indy Velo splits once they figure out who joined, right? With 1 minute to go, they shuffle them up and say, if I join Indy Velo or what is it, Training Peaks Virtual now, sometimes I'm pin 1, sometimes I'm pin 2, depends on who shows up, right? I'm on that line.
We're going to mix them, and then they could have an option for organizers or Zwift, if they're the organizer, that in this race, it's ranked differently, but at least you have somebody that you're starting with. So it's more like a mass start race, but with separate categories for the finish line, or everybody's going to be at the same result at the end, acted like it was the same pen. You'd have to figure out which option is more wanted there, but there is some weeds there, but at least you got people who are able to race other people. You know what I mean? Like it's actually interesting in some sort of way rather than just having an empty pen at all different times of day. Because I can't find a good race unless it's like midday here or like super late night. I can get the Europeans up early enough,
That's what happens a lot. Lee and I are both on the West Coast, so it's like 6 p.m. Yeah, 6 p.m. And that's why sometimes it's like I'll just race up. Even when I was in the A races would have like 2 or 3 people, and you're like, oh. So it becomes a numbers thing, yes, of course. But I think because they do that outside. Sometimes when the category is too small, they pop 4 or 5 riders into the category. It's like 45s races with the 55s or 50 plus. And it's like you just race together, score it separately. I don't know if it can figure that out, but maybe that's something just to kind of help with some of the, and that goes into the some races don't have as many attendance because there's so many events, and there's a lot of like Zwift events that are specifically like polling, like the Tour of Watopia that we get, or I don't know what's going on. There's so many. I'm always complaining that there's too many. Because when I want to ride with, I want to race with people when I do race. When I get on Zwift, which is infrequently now, I do want people to race with. That's the reason why I'm on there. So.
Totally.
That's good. Categories. And
I find in general, Racing Score has tightened up the events, despite the majority of people saying it's worse. Social media has been rampant with worse. Actually, the last week there's been more I think it's good than there has been people posting I think it's bad. But a perfect example of this is a guy was complaining on Facebook how horrible ZRS was. So I went and looked on Zwift Power on his last race that he was on. He placed there was 70 people in his category. The time gap between first and 72nd was 35 seconds. And I said to him, like, this is the most even race I've ever seen in my life. You're telling me 35 seconds between first and 72nd is like a bad gap? That's amazing. That's like the most competitive race you're ever going to find. But he was just like, this is the worst. I have never seen more uneven categories in my whole life. And I'm like, the problem is what I find is if you go on Zwift Power and look at a lot of these races people complain about, it proves how even and actually how much better ZRS is working.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think also there is this map and the big events, I think also pull in a lot of the Zwift content, pull in people to do their ride, you know? And I do think that which is like, I don't know how to feel about that because I don't have the numbers in front of me. I've done some numbers in the past and looked, and I just, maybe I'm not as involved anymore because I'm not doing the rap. I'm not broadcasting these series as much, but or at all right this second, maybe there's some stuff working on in the background, but the reality of like the KISS, the Dirt, the Fusion League, there's all these community organizers that have come along and gone and the platform content competing with the community content is an interesting thing. And Zwift have really tried to like, hey, Herd Racing Series and, hey, the Zwift Tiny Races. And some of them do really, really well for participation and have a really broad, but I wonder how that's working out. I don't got the numbers on how that's working out. And I wonder if there's a lot of growth, if it's declining, if it's stagnant, the same, and what the encouragement and growth structure is for, MAP and the Tour Watopia and these things not competing directly with the community growth on a platform for the community organized events. And I think that that's a really big key to unlock in some ways that hasn't been totally figured out, or the structure and the tools aren't necessarily there to do it.
Yeah, I think the Zwift has a community. So it tries to have as many events. That's why like the map races or the baseline or whatever that is like 300, 500 people are doing it. And then you do like a 3-hour race and there's like 15 across the entire, like total signups. Those are like, hey, these have incentives, right? So incentive-based riding, training, that's the fun way. Like we're all pretty self-motivating. I'm kind of on down tick on my motivation right now, but like I can stare at the wall and do my workout and get it done, whether it's a kit unlock or a route badge or whatever it is. But there's a lot of people that want to just go on and they get their thing. If there was like a career mode or something instead of just like a trinket, right? Would that help with the competitive side of racing to go like, hey, I'm trying to improve my career because the sport is changing, because outside, off the bike, there's a career too. Like you have that. I race outside still, but the inside is like, it's just training sometimes. And the competitive part is not as lucrative, not monetarily wise, but like competitive juices wise.
Yeah, I think that's the pull when it comes to like a ZRL or the DRS and all those different things is like they set up a narrative structure for you to be in about your company. I think that's and the map and all this other stuff is one off. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm trying to get at is the clear communication as well as the ways in order to really establish one side of that coin, I guess is what I'm kind of getting at. So it's not necessarily like a lot of these community organizers are well established in their own right. Right? Sisu has their own website.
Mhm.
They've got their own series. They've got their own data. They've got all this stuff that they're kind of accumulating, DRS, FRR. They've all got these holdings in some sort of way, but they don't necessarily, have a means agreements official. Like there's a lot more that could go into their establishment in order to create what you just talked about there, which then I think would get more just natural buy-in and like natural marketing. Like I wouldn't say like marketing in like the like rah, 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 but it's like it's its own marketing.
Stuff, yeah.
It's its own like thing because people are through participation and growth.
Yeah, like the chasing tour, like the Flamme Rouge, because Casey did like a stage race, like it was like 15 days or whatever, and you were about to lose your mind. But it was like you were into it, and it's like the community stuff could be supported better. I think that's what I'm taking on, because it's like you do a 3R, like I'm like I know this what this is going to be, and it's sort of like, but a lot of new people don't know what that is. They're like, I'll just do the 300.
Well, and you talk about, Brian, you're talking about finding your motivation. I did that with a few of them here lately because I struggled with motivation too. I signed up for, was it the Indie Velo tour? And I actually, kind of got I found my passion for Indie Velo again because I kind of forced myself to do that tour. And I was like, oh, I forgot how good this platform is with, the racing
Training
and the
Peaks
bots and stuff like that.
Training Peaks
yeah,
virtual.
Training Peaks
everybody.
virtual. And I did the same thing with Flamme Rouge, right? Like I joined the Flamme Rouge thing, and it wasn't about winning a category or something like that, but how well I could do. Could I move up? Where could I be competitive? Where wasn't I? But it got me on the bike. Like those were my 2 biggest weeks of TSS probably in the last year. And in Indie Velo or Training Peaks perspective, it actually got a bunch of users to flip over to them. I mean, a lot of people that did that tour were normally regular Zwifters, right? And they kind of flipped for that. And I think all of the platforms could learn from that type of thing to get some more users to trial some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but so I don't know if you can talk about this. The pausing of the Zwift games or the Zwift World Series.
World Series, not Zwift games.
Sorry, not Zwift games. Zwift World Series pausing, because it's not it's a pausing to figure out what's going on, because there's things going on in the background. I didn't read too much in it, so I'm kind of ignorant in that sense. But are there the hoops that we're having to jump through to get this competitive thing? Because we want to have up to spec racing and and have that sort of try to squash the, oh, you're cheating, everyone's cheating. It's like, no, not everyone's cheating. The performance verification, the hoops that you have to jump through is limiting people's wanting to embrace the more serious stuff. How do we tackle that?
Okay. So okay, let's just talk about your question is, do the hoops make sense? That was your question.
No,
and
did my hoops hinder people wanting to get into the sport?
Okay.
The hoops make sense. Yes, I agree. The hoops make sense. Yeah, we need the hoops.
Yes and no. I mean, if they understand what they're for and why, and then I think that, again, like you see, okay, I see complaints about there's these hoops, but then I'm like, do you understand what you're doing? Like, you want to be involved in a race for a jersey that represents your nation, but you don't want to jump through a hoop to make sure that that jersey that represents the nation is at least up to some sort of standard.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I understand that. You're asking, that's a rhetorical question to somebody, or you're asking somebody. Here's the thing is, now I have that same thought. Like, yeah, I'm doing it because I want to win a jersey or represent my country or win a prize money. When do the hoops not? So the reason why we're jumping through the hoops is because of previous infractions and scrupulous sort of things that people do.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what is performance verification. Okay, because like right now in the standards of performance verification, you have a couple of different models, and what they're trying to get at is what's the truth. Okay. Nothing that we are doing other than the effort that I am putting into the pedals on my bike at home is real. Just so everybody knows, like the world that you're in isn't real in the sense of your understanding of your body here doing real things. And I see things here and percept. Okay. You're seeing pixels on a screen do things in an expression on a guess about what you're putting down on pedals. Okay. And so how accurate that guess is has different variances. Okay. And so, all of these trainer companies and power meter companies have a certain level of variance that's acceptable to them to sell you a trainer or a power meter. Okay. Now, from that standpoint, so we have to understand that first, to understand what we are doing with performance verification, because performance verification is all about how good is the guess and does it represent. Okay, that's one type of performance verification is how good is the guess. And then there's, and how do we get at how good is the guess? So what is the plumb line that we are using about how good the guess is? And there's 3 different methods about that to my knowledge at this point. There might be more that I'm not aware of, but I'm pretty up to date on all of these at this point. Some other platforms that I'm not involved with might have something a bit more complicated than this, but on one end you have, which this causes a lot of witch hunts. Okay. And the other end does too. And well, they all kind of do. So on one end you have, on the left, I'll say, variance in recordings. You could have dual source, triple source, quadruple source, whatever it might be. And the closer to 0 the variance is, the more happy we are. Okay. Eddie Huell, man. Like all kinds of situations where, actually plenty of situations where people in precedent in the past have broken another plumb line, which is data performance, like a passport, and still got questions and had to prove themselves even though their variance was 0 or 1.01, or not 0. It's never 0, but was barely anything. Okay. So then there's the middle of the road, in my opinion, which it takes variance into account. It takes your data profile into account, and you need to prove that you can do it within. You need to go and prove that this performance is within your data profile. Now that has questions behind it, because it's like, well, was that actually what happened on the day? All you're doing is showing that this is within your data profile, and we don't know that that's actually what happened on the in the data we can see from an event that actually took place with the finish line and the results, right? And then we have another one that's on the what I'll say on the over here on the right, then just on a pendulum, and this is a data performance profile that you always just sit within, that has like an algorithm and AI behind it, or like maybe not AI, but like it's just like always checking to see whether or not you had a breakthrough or not had a breakthrough. Does this sit within what we can predict about what you've always done at different heart rates and different all this kind of stuff? And then we flag it or we don't flag it based on whether it's within a variance of your data profile, right? So those are kind of the places where performance verification sits. Performance verification for a really long time within the space before Whoosh days or before TPV or Indy Velo days functioned a lot on flag with variance and then prove performance. Like that was always, that's why you always did the power tests up front to give you a data profile. And then if you went outside of that data profile or there was a variance, well, let's prove that you can do this to at least give some grace on this situation if need be, as long as things aren't like way out of whack. We're going to believe that you can do this. And they make you test really quickly, that we see that your heart rate and that your performance is very the same. And so as far as consistency toward the truth, I see why a lot of times the best situation landed in the middle there. But just like all doping stuff goes, that's the most expensive.
Right.
That's the most expensive because you have to have a person sitting there analyzing data and like figuring out whether or not afterwards things were real, not real, all that kind of stuff, right?
And a decision needs to be made.
Decision needs to be made.
So with all that, I've got one observation, then I've got a question for you, Nathan. But my observation is one thing from the past from Nathan and I is one thing I love seeing now, probably in the last 18 months. People are getting annulments and they are not getting branded as bad. It's a legit problem. And I love that we're not where we were 5 years ago when every annulment was something suspicious, right? So I think that's a huge step that we've made now is an annulment is not an automatic they've done something wrong. So my question kind of is for you, Nathan, is are we seeing more hardware problems that's causing things like this pause, or is it just that we're tightening up the what's acceptable? Like
Well, that's a little bit more complicated. Like, I think that the pause has a lot of stuff going on. Like,
Yeah.
I think at the heart of the pause though is that there's some hardware issues right now that are going on in the space. I just think that really, I think that there were some advancements that were thought to be advancements that would be really, really great. And they didn't take into account or have the testing that was necessary in order to, and those advancements were in the hardware side of things that I think are awesome, but didn't necessarily, weren't ready for esports. Like, whoa, we didn't expect that. Like, and so, yeah, I think we just saw a lot of really intense variances. And then when you have a whole lot of variances going on, and you're judging mainly on flags, and then you've got to do this middle of the road thing. And then there's like all these other interests going around with Whoosh involved and Zwift involved and TPV involved. And then you get into a space where, hold on a second, back off. Like, is every single situation being judged the same way? Can we judge every situation the same way? Do we have the personnel for that? Like, you start getting into a space where, and also does it turn into a clown show where there's just a million annulments because we're not able to do the work in order to verify all these off of a data profile. You know what I mean? So, and then are we even doing that all the time? And so it gets really, and that's where I'm like, guys, this needs to be out of commercial interest completely. There is a mandate now at this point. If the UCI is getting bids on world championships and we've got this highest level of racing, in my opinion, there is like, hey, without commercial interest involved in any way whatsoever, PR involved in any way whatsoever, like no platform interest involved at all. We just need the law needs to be above everything. And it needs to go across all platforms at this point. If people's careers and their public reputation, if you're bringing in sponsored athletes, you know what I mean? Let's say Tade races, right? Let's say that Tade races and Tade races on Whoosh and races on Zwift. And then Tade gets annulled on Zwift. And then Tade doesn't get annulled on Whoosh, or Tade this and then Tade doesn't get annulled on either of them, but he actually had something, whatever. And then somebody, you know what I mean? Like then it's, well, why? Well, we're down a rabbit hole that everyone's going to want to you just wreck everything. It's just completely, and you're back in the early 2000s Lance Armstrong era, actually at that point, wondering who's actually paying who instead of, there's just a law that everybody submits to that the UCI needs to bring. And I think we're heading that direction, and I'm really hopeful. I had a lot of really great conversations with people who are involved in independent governance spaces. And, I think that they're taking that pretty seriously. It's getting the platforms to all agree, I think, and to not, and to do something for the greater good of the sport, actually, that there is a law that is good, that we call good, that comes down over the top of it all for the sake of the sport and the sake of the athletes. And then they all just get to play. Like now you're in the same sandbox and as long as you all are in this sandbox, do your thing, show off your product, show off what you got. And then we know that there isn't anything else screwy going involved. And to be honest, anywhere on that pendulum, as long as we all agree, fine. Now I might have opinions about, right? So like, I'm not going to say that this is objectively wrong, and people are going to be mad at me about saying this, but I think you cannot ethically say that the rule makers, because you have purists, and I'm a purist actually at heart, just so you guys know, but I'm going to steel man something because it ought to be steel manned, because from an ethical point of view, it's actually true. I want what the pedals and the power to the pedals to be what is as best as we possibly can get to that. That's what I want. Okay. But if you are in a situation where the rule makers are allowing a data passport to go as high as it needs to go within certain thresholds, and that's the rules, that's the game. Well, everyone has to submit to that game, or else like that's the rules of the game. You're agreeing to that game. And everybody, now, right or wrong, you got to point at the game maker at that point. And whether or not you participate in that game, fine. If you want to judge that, but someone's going to participate in that game. You see what I'm saying? Like, so at that point, it's more about, hey, we need something we all agree upon, understand, and it's the same all the time, rather than like, this platform bad, that platform. No, we just need consistency across the board. Yeah, so that's my take. Does that all make sense? I don't know if like,
that was clear.
I think it's great.
100%.
Yeah. And I think where I take that to the next level is I want them to solve it for elite, not because this comes off harsh, not that I care. I'm not going to be an elite racer. I want them to solve it for elite because that allows us as the regular consumer, if they solve that, to be able to jump on that bandwagon. Because right now, there are people out there, and I think this is completely wrong. And I think Nathan, I think you'd agree with this. There's people out there that are going to read a specific trainer A or trainer B or whatever is getting annulled consistently or often in elites, and I'm racing a guy on that same trainer. He's crap, right? Like that's not happening, guys. What these annulments are coming down to for legit hardware things on the elite level are still within the margin of error of almost any trainer out there on the market that's under $800, right? Like, but I want them to solve that because that.
Yeah, 5%, 3 to 5% is the general trainer. And then you have the elite trainers that get down to the 1 to 2%. All the annulments, almost every one of them, not all of them, but almost every one of them, to my knowledge, have been around that 5, sometimes a little bit over on the higher end. Some of the sprints kind of get a little bit out of control.
Very specific short windows. Yeah.
But here's the thing is you end up in a witch hunt on the variant side of things. You end up in because you can get a lot of false positives. Like Gabby's situation's a really good one. She got an annulment. The Justo that she had in Germany was reading really off, they thought, but then we found out when we looked at her data profile that the pedals were reading way under her current power profile for what she's peaking at, like way under. So then the question ends up, well, is it that the Justo was giving a little bit within the tolerance that we accept and the pedals were way under? And you see what I'm saying? Like you get into this position where you're like, the bigger leap of faith when I looked at the data was that the power pedals were reading correct. That would have been a way bigger leap of faith from our current data profile. But variance at this point right now, because the way that things seem to have been treated as of recently was more of like, well, we can't verify anything right now, so we're just going to say screw it. Like rather, you know, and at that point you're like, well, when you have, and at that point, if that's the rule, then it makes sense to pause because the hardware better get things correct so your duals are on, because any variance outside of things equals snap and everyone's getting annulled. So
yeah. I think the negative backlash for the pausing is that it was a big event for Zwift, but I agree with the pausing. Whoa, let's figure this. Let's make sure that we're, like you said, Nathan, is like all consistent, right? Let's pause and get a consistency going.
One thing that we really need moving forward though is like not going backwards and looking at results and then changing results. You know, that's one thing I know that the individual TPV thing, I mean, under the hood, man, TPV might look like an old rusty car. Sorry, TPV. Like, but under the hood, it's the freaking Tesla, it's the freaking whatever.
Preaching to the
dude.
choir
Like,
here.
Oh,
it
it's got the
is-
guts.
It's got it. It's got it. And
we just don't like the visuals as
the
currently.
reality, and that's a hard one for me. I can't bite that bullet, but like the truth is that being able to, things are out of whack, and if things are out of whack and you're being removed from the game, you're gonna fix your shit. You're gonna fix your stuff, man.
You're
Right?
gonna fix
Like,
it, yeah.
and so things go out of whack, and you're like, oh shoot, and you get a warning. Hey, within whatever, sorry, you're out, and then the results are clean.
Yeah.
They're
It
just
doesn't
clean.
it doesn't let you influence the race, because this goes back to I was thinking about this when Brian was asking the question about is the barrier to entry and some of this stuff too big, right? And we, for power passports and all that, but you've got the other side of it, right? If you can't have this wide open public race for a national jersey and then be like, yeah, we annulled the first 5 guys because they were garbage when we tested them after the race. Well, it's like,
Yeah.
the 6th guy got pulled away by the top 5. He was the only one strong enough to hold on to the complete garbage power meter or whatever it was, and he won the race, right? Like doing it ahead of time or doing it
So,
real
on
time,
that
you
front-
stop the influence.
On that front, okay, so like all of this with like second power sources and all of this like dual recording and da 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 da, like my take is there's a future space where we have independent governance, and I think that we need that. You want to go into the platform esports idea. We have a sport though already, and because we already have a sport that exists in the imaginations of human beings out in the real world, I think that this will have to place itself somewhere within that framework. I don't think we're gonna eventually. I don't think we can go unless the domination is that big to Fortnite level. I just don't think that we can have platform specific, like
Nobody's
in that
gonna
respect.
watch people sweating on their bikes,
Right?
That,
And
that
so,
number.
yeah, and so I think that I don't know. I think
We're
that
never
Tron,
gonna get to Dota.
I think
in
Tron
an
is a
invitational.
Tron. I think Tron's there's a future where like I wouldn't limit how big competitive indoor sports can get in a virtual space. I don't know about that. I mean maybe not. Maybe I'm a little too techno geeky, whatever. But
Look, I want the sport to grow to be that. I'm just also a realist. Like, who is the most popular Twitch Zwift streamer? Is the Pimp CS guy, the Counter-Strike guy. And when he's not doing Counter-Strike,
but
he
that's
only
the
has
thing.
like 200 people watching
Yeah,
him.
totally,
When he
but
plays
Brian-
Counter-Strike, he has 2,000
Brian,
people watching him.
I'm gonna say what you said though.
Okay.
Okay? You said that once we can see it in game and we don't need to look at him, then we got something. And when you know
Oh.
someone real,
Yeah, but cycling isn't that popular. I know at the beginning of this show, you said you would like to walk into anyone's house and sit at their table and say, cycling, my sport. If I say cycling, they have an icon and they have these things. I don't think cycling is going to be that
but
popular.
cycling's
It's
the most watched thing in the world at a certain time of year. The Tour de France is the most watched sporting event in the world.
No way. Not
Yes.
to the World Cup.
Hands down.
The World
No,
Cup?
it is. Yep, it beats the hand. Yes, go do a search. It beats out the world. It is cycling's huge if we can express it right. Look, I'm not
Okay,
talking
okay.
a year,
I'm not-
2,
okay.
5. I'm saying if we have literal what you saw in the movie Tron, feel like that the whole
Okay.
like I think then, but I'm not saying we're there right now. But I imagine
okay,
a future where.
I would love to. I personally,
But I'm pie in
I'm
the
a
sky,
cyclist.
Brian. I'm so pie in the, like I'm so
You are
like,
definitely pie in the sky. You are definitely pie in
Well,
the
it's
sky.
like the touch on like the people don't know cycling. That happens every year. I race nationals. I go into work on Monday and they, hey Lee, what did you do yesterday? Oh, I raced nationals. They're like, what? What do you mean you raced nationals? I'm like, yeah, nationals was yesterday. In what? Oh, virtual cycling. They're like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah. My dad loves cycling and he's not a cyclist. So it is popular to people, but there's a big hurdle for non-cyclists to watch our sports that are not like my dad watching Zwift Community Live would be a stretch.
Yeah,
But
it's dude. I agree. 100%.
That's the thing. It's no.
I agree.
I'm with you. I'm pie in the sky too.
Current state, totally not
Yeah.
gonna have. I think though that there might be a place in the future that looks very different than where we
That
are
was
right.
my
I'm not
last
saying.
question. That was my last question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you see the sport in 5 years, 10 years in the future?
I think that we see the basic structures that we need in the next 3 to 5 years to make it. I think we'll have a good shot at like something that looks pretty cool, kind of cool, very similar to what we currently have at Olympics, maybe in Saudi Arabia. We'll see what happens with that. There's that esports thing coming down the road. And then I think that that'll be a kickoff point. Look, the Whoosh investment is really good actually for the space. It's really, really, really good for the space. Oh, yeah. It keeps things growing. It keeps things motivated. It isn't dependent on a single entity's commercial success that, is about a fitness application that also has an esport. They're very committed to, right now to esports. I really hope like what I saw there like was eye-opening in some ways. When I went to Abu Dhabi, it was like, okay, whoa, there's a lot, man. There's a lot of learning to do, when I talk about the administrative knowledge, like there's a lot that needs to come out there, but 5 years, I think we're in a place where we are second time through on an Olympic cycle. I think that we're going to be more multi-platform. I think that we're going to have, hopefully UCI events that are more world tour. There isn't just a world championships once. And I hope that there's a structure that all the federations will sit within, that we have onboarded both the early adopters and ones that go, whoa, the early adopters got something there from the federation standpoint. That's my hope. That's like my hope. The other option is things kind of fall apart and it becomes more platform and actually the sport shrinks, I think, if that happens.
Fragmented, you mean?
More fragmented and more, I'm here, you're there, some crossover, and it's more fight for commercial space and market value rather than playing in a sandbox of common rules. So
I have a follow-up to that. Do you see it more simulation, like the competitions and the more serious stuff, more simulation, or more game stuff like Repack Rush or more power-ups and stuff like that?
I think currently in the next 5 years, we're not going to see a whole lot of endemic cycling graphical game mode acceleration because of everything that we had just talked about. Making that development meaningful takes a lot of work, and it would take 3 to 5 years for the current investment to even get there. And I don't see the people or the leadership that interested in that. Or even have the mindset for that. We would really need someone who super, super, super cares and really understands game development, gets a team, and totally just goes all in on a passion project to create the stuff that we were talking about.
Which is how almost every platform has started so far, right? It's been somebody's passion project. So
you need to slice the incubation team to do the go off.
Well, it was the constant rumor of Indie Velo was Zwift 2.0. What Indie Velo was doing under the hood, we were just like, man, if a graphic designer could just come in and overlay for nice graphics and a bigger world, this would be the best platform out there.
So, okay, one thing I will say though on the future state, the whole multi-platform thing, a lot of people hear that and what I'm talking about is the sport, the competitive space, right? I'm talking about where do we see that going? I'm not saying that, more people are going to ride this platform or that platform or market shares or whatever, all that kind of,
that's
all I'm saying is
because we agree. Yeah, it's esports. It's cycling. Regardless if Zwift is around, my Whoosh is around, if any of these companies are around, the sport of e-cycling, which is indoor training, whatever, the hardware gets better, the cyclists get more into it, and the immersion, the Zwift plays. Speaking of Zwift play, I might as well play right here. So hopefully round 2, they have a better shifting button if they do that. But the reason why I asked if you want to lean more towards simulation versus like the simulation competition, there could be a gaming competition as well, but physical activity is one of the main pushing points. So genetics are one thing.
I think that'll be fun, Brian. I think that the gaming side of in enticing a workout is what that's going to be about. I think that's what that's going to be about. I think that there is a space for the sim game to mix. That makes a lot of sense. But it needs to look like cycling. It needs to look like sim.
Yeah, it's like BMX. Going back to the BMX of the thing, it's like what's the race in BMX versus like the other? There's like downhill mountain bike and then cross country mountain bike. I mean, they're like two different disciplines. And there's people that are like, hey, I like the game stuff, but I'm also like this one thing. I think there's space for that. So that's.
I mean, think like you're leading somebody out. You're leading somebody out. We talked about this a little bit on last Tuesday, or I think it was, or the Tuesday before on the stream with Zwift Live. You're leading somebody out, and you lead them out as a lead out role, and they get a power up or a boost that's extra because the lead out was so good. Right? Like that's actually gamification, because that's just made up. Right? But it's totally cycling endemic. It's total skill. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I think that there's places to create motivation that aren't simulation. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they're actually gamified, but people don't understand. They think Mario Kart, and it's like, no, gamification just means new logical rule sets within a graphical virtual world that makes sense to your cycling expression.
I think everybody thinks RNG, and that's not what it is. That's not what it has to be.
No.
Well, it's like when I watch you team time trial, Nathan, your guys' team is always in typically a fantastic line.
Well, because they're going to get their butt chewed if they're not.
Yes, exactly. But as gamification, that would be a perfect thing. The longer your team is in a perfect line, the more of a bonus you get. If someone pulls out of the line, you lose your bonus, and the team goes faster as you are perfect.
Like little increments of fast. That's kind of a cool idea, actually, if you do your job right.
Yeah. Hey, we got great ideas on this show. Come on.
Another
one is the Zwift Play. I think the repack, because I've never done repack rush. I don't care about it. I think it's great for whatever they wanted to do. I wish they would take those little chevrons and put them in races and have them on the road, and you can steer to it and you can line up and
you'd have to call it, but in order for people to be happy, Brian, I don't want people to be
happy. I just want it to be better.
No, but you'd have to call it tailwind instead of chevron, right?
Yeah, whatever.
I found the tailwind, and then they'd be happy about it.
And then you but if you have those strategically, then you can use the Zwift Play.
They had that on Crit City for a short time, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember doing that.
Gabby kicked my ass, actually.
That's the thing, is like, I personally want simulation. I want as close to simulation as possible. But I like that companies are pushing their vision. If that's their vision and they push it, do it in a way that maybe it doesn't make people happy and the masses are pissed off, but you're pushing the limits instead of going. I just feel the repack rush is a wasted thing, where it could be like, don't put it off into the, off to the place that no one really goes. Do like a Crit City thing and put the whatever tailwinds on there, and you're like, hey, I know this effort's going to come here. This can plan my attack. Blah blah blah. It's just like the little inclines or and then you have power ups too. And then if you have this team sort of like, hey, I know I'm going to do my lead out, or you have teammates, you could trade your power. These are all great ideas that we are. Thanks, Nathan, for being on with 2 hours.
Yeah,
do we have any? We can
go for 2 more, but I gotta go get my workout in now.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think
I just typed in chat.
We'll have to come back. We'll have to come back in 2 months' time, 3 months' time, maybe, because I think a lot's going to happen over the next.
Right on. Yeah, because we didn't even talk on Echelon Racing League. We didn't talk, and the Nationals will be coming up again. That I got to get motivated to do. I'm not motivated.
Get moving.
I got to get moving. All right, Nathan, all right,
jumping through those hoops.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the hoops next week. I don't want to do another Power Passport test. I did a 4DP test that meant nothing.
I'm gonna go do one of those. I
like doing the 4DP test, which is actually a 20-minute effort. I think the Power Passport is a 12-minute effort. Whatever.
Yeah, it's like 2.6. a 3 and a 12.
Yeah. So the 12 is not as bad. Like I did the 20, I did the whatever, the 5 minute and the 20 minute, and I just don't like doing them all the time. I want to do
They
one.
freaking hurt, man. They hurt.
They suck. And mentally, like I don't like doing them. And so I'm always worried I didn't do well on the test. And if I do an effort, because my echelon racing league last year, I did Cat B, I don't even exist in that race. I did that whole race, was in a breakaway for like 25 minutes.
Annulled.
And I don't even exist. No, it wasn't even annulled. I was removed.
All right, gotta go,
I just
guys.
wanted to say that so I could drink.
Oh, go ahead.
All right.
Lee.
All right, now
Thanks, Nathan.
Lee. Goodbye,
Cue in the
everybody.
music?
This is the
Good night.
cue the
Push the
music.
button.
Goodbye, everybody. Now we're saying goodbye. Thanks again.
Later.